Well, my name is James Tree-Gilmore, and the reason it's the Tree hyphen, it's not because I'm keeping my maiden name. It's the Tree is a tribal name. I'm half Cherokee, and Gilmore is my Anglican name. I'm a licensed massage therapist. I'm a craniosacral therapist, and I'm a myoneural release therapist. My background in the medical field goes way back to when I was a young teenager in the 1970s. I just dated myself, so you all know how old I am. My mom was the director of special ed for the school district around Lansing, Michigan. And she was called by a doctor, an osteopathic doctor named John Upledger, and he was doing research on developing a modality that he could pass osteopathic principles on to nurses, massage therapists, different kinds of therapists, so that they could then use those therapies, which are very, very effective, to spread the benefits of osteopathic medicine without being a DO. And he approached my mom. He said that he felt that the therapy would be really beneficial for kids with learning disabilities. And would she get parental permission from 103 students in the school district that had learning disabilities so that he could do the therapy on them as an experiment to see how effective and to fine tune it. And it was so phenomenally successful that my mom, who had no medical background, said, I really want to learn this. So she was his first student. She's 87 now, and she's still practicing on infants and children. And so in the 1970s, he actually taught her the first cranial sacral therapy that he had developed as an experiment to see if someone with no medical background could develop these therapies and use them successfully. So there I was the guinea pig. My mom figured I had learning disabilities, and I did. I couldn't concentrate. I was a typical boy. Every time I was looking out the window instead of listening to the teacher, they said, "There's something wrong with that boy." And there really wasn't, but there was. So I grew up in craniosacral therapy and in osteopathic experiences. And my brother, and then I joined the medical industry, which is an industry, as a biomedical engineer. I traveled around the country. I helped develop and work with and install and maintain high-tech laboratory equipment. And I did that for almost 30 years. Great career, I really enjoyed it. It gave me a phenomenal understanding of the mechanics and the electrical system of the human body. We were developing these high-tech instruments using radio frequency, lasers, fluidics, all these different things. And I would see how it related to how the human body worked, because we have a fluidic, hydraulic, electrical system in our body, all these systems. When I was probably in my 30s, my brother married an osteopath, Dr. Feeney. She was not just an osteopath, she taught in osteopathic colleges a specialty in osteopathic medicine called cranial osteopathy. And she recognized that I had some abilities and talents that would fit into that field. So for 8 years, she worked with me on a part-time basis, training me in what we call the therapeutic effects of cranial osteopathy. So I worked with that. Eventually, she moved to Colorado, where I was living, and we formed with 2 other partners a pain clinic. And I was her therapist, although there was no such thing as an osteopathic therapist. It was just she trained me to be that so that she could then, what most doctors do is they work with people they figured out, and then if they need extended therapy, they pass them on to a physical therapist. That's the role of the therapist. So I was kind of like a model for what would hopefully someday be osteopathic therapists. It was a real privilege to work with her. She's phenomenal. She's a genius, in my opinion. She would take an hour to interview a client or a patient and really delve into their history all the way back to their birth and everything that had happened to them on every level to find out the source of their problem. And most people that came to the clinic had been through everything else that was out there. They'd been to Mayo Clinic and never found results. So she taught me the art of in-depth interrogation to really find the source of whatever, in my case, a client would come to me that has a condition. And so I use my background in anatomy, modern medicine, and traditional medicines, and osteopathic medicine to really try to get deep into the situation, and with great success. the more information we have, of course I can't diagnose, a doctor can, but I can evaluate. The more information we have about a person's life and their history, oftentimes people are carrying something in their body from 20, 30 years ago. And they've just grown used to it, so they don't even think about the incident that happened that may have caused their problem, their pain. So over the years, I started part-time, and I decided that I needed some paper on the wall to prove that I knew what I was doing. So I went to the Upledger Institute and learned craniosacral therapy from the Upledger Institute. And Dr. Feeney said that it was going to ruin me because it would box in my intuitive ability to work with people. And she was kind of right, but I'm kind of a rebel, so I didn't stick with the 10-step protocol. I developed my own protocols. The reason they have the 10-step protocol with craniosacral therapy in the Upledger Institute is so it's a fail-safe thing that you can't hurt people doing the therapy if you follow the protocols. And so with myoneural release therapy, I've done the same thing. Following Dr. Upledger's example, I've developed a protocol that if you follow these steps, you will not induce any pain or any dysfunction into the body. But I want to encourage you to, as you get comfortable with the protocols and you use them, to then allow your other training and your other backgrounds to come in and you can gently modify it. We formed the clinic in Colorado. I went full-time with that. I quit my corporate job, went full-time with that, and then felt called to move to Montana, northwestern Montana, and open a practice up there. So I did. I moved my practice up to the Flathead Indian Reservation, which I found was filled with people that wanted the therapy that didn't have any money. And something I've learned, if you're in the service industry and you don't make a profit, you can't be of service because you're going to go broke and you're going to have to go work at the gas station, which is a service station. But so one thing that's really important, one of the things I like about this therapy is it's a very profitable therapy. It's quick, it's easy, it's fun actually, and the results are so dramatic that I charge by the session, not by the hour. This is something a lot of people have to get out of their mind, to think, okay, I charge so much for an hour. This therapy actually takes what used to manually take 20 minutes to do on the physical body, 3 minutes. And it's not McDonald's, it's not just fast food. For instance, I'm going to teach you about reflexology, myoneural reflexology. Normally, it takes, this is a chart of the human hand for reflexology. To do a normal reflexology session, you have to hit every one of these points on the hand, and it takes about an hour to do that. With myoneural release therapy, it takes about 90 seconds to do the same thing, to trigger all of these different points, because you're working on the whole hand all at one time. So, like I said, next generation therapy, and there will be more generations after this. Just like reflexology was developed and took hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, to be developed, and it's been passed on. But people have learned to modify it. I'll talk more about that, and I'll actually pass this around so that if you haven't filled this out, oops, sorry, see that? If you haven't filled this out, and I need your mailing address, you're not going to get a diploma, but I'll send a certificate to you. So anyhow, I realized that I wasn't going to make a living doing craniosacral therapy up there, even though that's one thing that you learn as a therapist. There's no lack of people that want therapy. The problem is the lack of money, because insurance doesn't cover it. So you have to find a way around it. And most of the clients that come to me are people that have exhausted every other thing that insurance will cover, and they haven't found relief, and so they'll come to me. Now, I have set up a 501c nonprofit up in Montana, and it's only for 3 counties because of the laws, that gets donations from corporations and people to cover therapies for people who can't afford it. And our intake form on that is if they're in chronic pain, they live in either in hospice or they're in extended care facilities, things like that, then we have sources, funds that are available to pay for not just this therapy, but any kind of alternative therapy that's not covered. And I'm hoping that, I learned it from a group called Guardian Angels that raised funds for cancer patients who had basically run out of money, and their insurance wasn't covering things, so they could get a grant of $1,000 to continue therapies or whatever. And we'll talk about that right now too. So worked with Dr. Feeney for quite a while. Went up, opened my practice there, moved down to what's called the Bitterroot Valley. Went to work for a pharmaceutical corporation, and I will be the first one to tell you I will never get a vaccine. I had one flu shot in my life, and I'll never have it again because I got so sick within 4 hours. It's the worst case of the flu I've ever had in my life. And I'm not going to go off on that as a tangent, but the company I work for is the second world's largest pharmaceutical company, a vaccine company. And the things I witnessed caused me to quit out of integrity. I couldn't work for them anymore. And it was a good paying job. But anyhow, so I quit working for them, and I went back into private practice again. And I had an amazing opportunity to meet Dr. Judy Schmidt, MD, who was an oncologist and had an oncology clinic in Missoula, Montana. And she had witnessed that in her clients, in her patient base, the ones that went through chemotherapy without any side effects were ones that were engaged in acupuncture, massage therapy, that had alternative therapies, herbal things, essential oils. So she's, as a trained medical scientist, she's written numerous papers, used to work for Mayo Clinic. She had to say, well, there's something going on here. And excuse me. So when I met her, she was also a hematologist, and I had a real low cell count, red cell count, so that's how I met her. And we got talking about alternative because her intake form saw that I was a cranial sacral therapist, and she's like, well, what's that? So that started out an interesting conversation that lasted over a few weeks, and then she said, would you help me develop an integrative clinic where we can bring these other modalities into her oncology clinic? And with the help of a guy named Rick Beck, who is a Reiki master, an ex-corporate lawyer, he quit his corporate lawyer job to become a Reiki master. We worked with several other therapists and the nurses and the staff, and we developed an integrative clinic that for 4.5 years was phenomenally successful until Dr. Schmidt decided to retire to Maui. So during that time, that's when I developed myoneural release therapy. I used the combination of my backgrounds with the experiments, or not experiments, but with the research we were doing with the people going through chemotherapy and radiation, and developed this therapy that is really, really beneficial for people with debilitating illnesses, fibromyalgia, lupus, MS, and a host of other things, plus sports injuries, which in a few minutes we're going to do a demonstration of the effectiveness of this therapy on this young man over here. And then he'll be free to go enjoy the beautiful day out there. So I guess that brings me to where I am now. I developed the therapy, I developed the modality. Oh, well, actually what happened is my clients that were chronic, that had to come back like every week, well, that gets pretty expensive after a while. So I developed this so that I could teach it to their spouses so they could just get this therapy at home. And I had to really concentrate on how to make this available, foolproof, to people who had no medical background. And what grew out of that was, well, it's sort of like I wrote a book, and it started out as a magazine article. And the more I wrote the article, the bigger it got, and I kept thinking of more things that needed to be added. So as I developed this real simple technique for a spouse or a partner at home or a family member to use on somebody who has chronic pain and it brought relief, but they had to continue to do the therapy, it kept growing until it became myoneural release level 1, and then level 2, and then the instructor courses. In developing a modality, any new modality, you have to really do a lot of research to make sure that you won't induce dysfunction into somebody. And there are contraindications for this modality, which we'll get into later. Certain things that you don't do, or conditions that you don't use this on because it'll aggravate the condition. So there we are. That's the introduction of how myoneural release therapy came into being. I'm going to take a quick break here.